Hey, it's time again to ride the pipeline. You're not just surfing the web, you're riding the sales pipeline with your host, Matt Hines from Hines Marketing. Hey, Matt.
How we doing?
I'm doing good. You ready to ride surf the pipeline today here?
Let's get it on.
All right.
Let's get it on. Thank you, everyone, again, for joining us. Sales Pipeline Radio. So excited to have you here. We're having a ton of fun with this show. We've had some great guests. I'll introduce our guest today very shortly, and have some great guests coming up we'll talk about here in a little bit. Can't believe it's already February. It's the first week of February. January is already over. Someone told me a Happy New Year this morning, and I had to think about that for a second. And it does feel like we were just watching the Rose Bowl parade just a couple days ago, and here we are already coming up on Valentine's Day, which I am also woefully far behind on. But that's not what we're here to talk about. I want to just quickly talk about our guest today. This is one of those where we have some amazing guests, but this one for sure I'm just not worthy. For those of you that know Aaron Ross, you may either you know him or you know of him. Many, if you are in B2B sales, if you're in software as a service sales, I'm sure you're familiar with his book, Predictable Revenue. Aaron wrote the book based on the work that he did with Salesforce.com in its very early days. I mean, literally taking that company from $5 million a year to $100 million a year, which, given how big it is now, sounds small, but anyone who's worked at a small company knows how monumental a change that is, going from a $5 million to $100 million a year company. His system and the backbone of his system, Predictable Revenue, has helped sales organizations nationwide, really worldwide, develop their own predictable, repeatable revenue streams. And Aaron, before we get into not only the work you've been doing in the book, but in your new book, From Impossible to Inevitable, which I want to talk a bit about, there's something that is on a lot of your bios that probably people don't know the backstory on, but always wondered. And that's the idea that you were a dad of 9 going on 12. So, Aaron, first of all, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Happy to be here.
And before we get into the real work, I mean, for those of you who get emails from Aaron, you know that family is a big part of his life. He's always talking about his kids. But talk a little more about what 9 going on 12 means.
Oh man! By the way, if you hear any background noise, like screaming, like we keep adding kids, and so I don't have any. I started with offices at homes, but then at some point I always get kicked out of them, and so I have to work from closets. Like I've been doing Snapchat for fun, and anyway, closets. Empty rooms, laundry rooms, cars have become my new home offices.
Goodness.
We just get squeezed out. But,
yeah.
Actually any day now we're waiting for a call to go to Florida because we're adopting a new baby there who's being born any hour a day now. And there's 2 more boys we're adopting, 11-year-olds from China. I'm going out to China in March, so then we'll be at 12. But I think ultimately I never expected to have a big family. On one hand, I think I've learned... I only got married 5 years ago, so I'm going from 0 to 12 kids in less than 5 years. This is probably a different book on hyper-scaling families, but it's been, I feel like building a family for me has been sort of my emotional wealth, and building a business has been financial wealth. They're related. I think what's different about me, at least either from what I've learned and what I like people to understand, is that they're not in conflict. Having a family has been the number one motivator for me to have to grow my business.
Yeah.
And there's other benefits, but again, they're more complementary for me. It's not something where my family takes away from my career, because it doesn't. It enhances it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I have 3 young kids, and there's days when I feel like I'm barely holding on. So 9, let alone 12, it sounds impossible. To your point, though, I think there is something about a family, and not just having a spouse, but having kids that completely rely on you. That, for me at least, sort of changed my perspective on what I'm doing at work, but also changed my perspective on why I'm doing it.
Yep, everything. And by the way, I think we got the point. It was harder to get to 5 kids. After that, I think we had more systems, and then going from 5 to 12 has been probably easier than from 2 to 5.
I really, really hope my wife's not listening to this show right now. We've talked about being done, and every once in a while, I think she would keep going forever. Honestly, I think she's. We both love our kids, awesome. But all right. Anyway, let's talk a little business. I think for those of you that I want to just quickly address any listeners who for some reason have been living under a rock and are not familiar with you and your work. Talk a little bit about Predictable Revenue. Maybe sort of like sort of highlight the work you did at Salesforce and sort of where Predictable Revenue came to be.
It's funny because that book came out 4 years ago, and we're actually here talking today because the new book is coming out next week. But Predictable Revenue, it's funny now, it's been called the Sales Bible for Silicon Valley. But I think there was three ideas, let's call it three big ideas that really shook people up in the way they thought about sales. And the first is that the book is all about how at Salesforce.com, like you said, I was there. Salesforce wasn't growing the way it wanted to be in the enterprise segment, mid-market enterprise. They had tons of inbound leads, but they're all mostly small business leads. And I helped create a prospecting system called Cold Calling 2.0. I couldn't think of a better name, as much as I never liked that name. But, they basically prospecting without making cold calls. That was very systematic in being able to generate quality appointments. And we were able to generate basically all the appointments we needed for our sales team that helped us double how fast we were growing. And wrote the book about that. A lot of companies now, outbound has become hot again. I think for years it was this ugly thing that people hated because content marketing was so hot. Now outbound's hot. And, to me, I think I love inbound. I love outbound. Two great tastes taste great together. But predictable revenue, again, there's maybe three, it's called the three big ideas. First is you have to specialize your sales teams. If you want a sales team, or if you have people who sell and you want them to be effective and to be able to grow it, you have to specialize them. Instead of generalists, where everyone is doing their own prospecting, responding to inbound leads, closing, and managing accounts, you have specialized roles where prospectors prospect, closers close. You've got post-sales roles like account management or customer success. And if you have inbound leads, you have inbound lead qualifiers, right? You have to do that in some way, shape, or form. That's one. Two is that you grow your business not by doubling you double the revenue not by doubling your sales team, but by doubling your pipeline, right, through predictable lead generation. The predictable lead generation is required in order to create predictable revenue. Okay, and you can't do that unless you specialize your sales teams. And the third point is, I think it's different. This idea of there's different types of leads. A lead is not a lead is not a lead. So in the book I laid out seeds, nets, and spears. These three types: word of mouth, marketing, prospecting, and why they're all great, but they're all different. They've got their pros and cons, and depending on your business and the stage, you may need to focus on one versus another. And the example in that book, I think, what would resonate is if you had 10,000 leads last year and you did 10 million in revenue, usually to double your revenue, you can't double your leads. Right? So next year you don't need 20,000 leads to get to 20 million. You probably need 5 times as many leads because you're going to need a different mix of leads, and they're of different qualities. So, what I've heard from people, I've gotten so many emails from people who said my business has been transformed primarily because I specialized my sales team. We doubled our results just because I specialized. So it's the number one thing I tell people they have to do if they're not doing it yet.
It's not overestimating or overqualifying to say that this book, Predictable Revenue, has been maybe the most influential book for B2B salespeople in the last 4 to 5 years. I think maybe Predictable Revenue and the Challenger Sale tend to be quoted and used most often. And I think the idea clearly of specialization, but also of lead segmentation, and the idea of nets and spears continues to work today. We've got this enormous focus on account-based marketing from B2B marketers that is based on the premise of the fact that, hey, we can't just wait for leads to come in the door. Our inbound marketing doesn't really give us control over quantity and quality. We need to be a lot more focused on what we need and be a little more precise. And what I love about that now, too, is you got sales and marketing teams working together on that. So if anyone wants to learn more about the book Predictable Revenue, if you haven't read it, definitely check out predictablerevenue.com. Lots of great content, great articles there. But we're mostly here to talk about the new book. Very, very excited about From Impossible to Inevitable. I feel like it's a coup that we have Aaron here today, and it's we have a scoop because this is a book that is launching next week, I believe next Tuesday. So very excited to talk about the book. Maybe just before we had to break here, give us the kind of backstory of where this book came to be. Why and how did you decide that it was time to write the next book?
Yeah, well, this is the book you start with. It actually updates Predictable Revenue in some ways, but the reason this book is written, it's partly because I went from I'm going from 5 to 12 kids, so I had the motivation to grow, and partly because I just had the same conversations. And so is my co-author, Jason Lemkin. We have these same conversations over and over and over again with companies who struggle to grow. It's the same conversations. And so we sort of wrote this book together, and there's these 7 parts, but the different parts are really the template for growth that a lot of the fastest growing companies in the world follow. Like Zenefits went from 1 to 100 million in 2 years, or even Salesforce, others. But it's like, it's not just rocket science. It's just why repeat all the mistakes that we and others have made. If we could put this into a book, like here's all this wisdom. You don't need to do a call. Just read the book first. Like just read the book, and it will answer. Your life will be changed because of at least one of these 7 things. I guarantee it, or we guarantee it. How to grow faster. It's a growth book, not a sales book. So
Love it.
I think the last thing is it'll answer.
Go ahead.
Just why you're not growing first. Like you will know why you're not growing or why you're struggling if you read this book to start.
Yeah, I can't recommend this book enough. I was lucky enough to get an early copy of the book. It's coming out next Tuesday, From Impossible to Inevitable. You can learn more about the book right now at the website FromImpossible.com. You can pre-order a copy. There's a great set of gifts available to those that download the book in advance. There's a chance to get some free tickets to the SaaStr conference. There's some other awesome resources available online. So go to FromImpossible.com to check that out. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. You're listening to Sales Pipeline Radio.
The Vanilla Group, Inc. is the only firm that delivers tele-based lead generation programs exclusively for enterprise technology providers. They achieve results 5 times higher than industry standards for outbound lead generation based on the research published by implementing their unique Telesales 2.0 methodology. The Vanilla Group is an award-winning leader in this space, and they get results like no other firms. The Vanilla Group supports firms from Fortune 500 companies to startups. To learn more, visit buildpipeline.com or call 888-335-0340. That's 888-335-0340.
Whether you're producing a seminar series, users conference, lunch and learn, or exhibiting at a trade show, Validar has a solution. From capturing leads at trade shows to managing on-site registration, tracking session attendance, gathering information, and providing sponsors lead retrieval, we have a full suite of solutions for you. Since 2005, Validar has been turning corporate events and trade shows into better business. Call 888-784-2929 or visit us at validar.com.
All right, let's pick it back up with Matt and his guest.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Well, you're listening to Sales Pipeline Radio. We've got a great guest today talking about his new book. We've got Aaron Ross, the author of Predictable Revenue, his new book, From Impossible to Inevitable. Got a great lineup of guests coming up over the next few weeks as well. Our next guest is going to be Josiane Fagon, who is an inside selling expert, has written a number of books, and has published her predictions for inside sales in 2016. So we'll be talking a bit about that. Have Megan Eisenberg, the CMO of MongoDB, in a couple weeks. She's going to be talking more about modern marketing, the role of marketing technology. And just booked, hot off the presses, in March, we are going to have Trish Bertuzzi, who is the CEO of the Bridge Group and the author of the new book, Sales Development Playbook. If you are in sales development, if you're doing inside sales, this is a must-read. And if you know Trish, it has her trademark wit, and it's just a fun read. So excited to have those upcoming guests. But let's talk a little more about this new book, Aaron. I think you speaking of people that have a great voice and are fun to read, I just, the stuff that you publish, not only, Predictable Revenue, but your content online, the emails you send out, it's just got such a great voice. And this book's no different. Talk a little bit, some of the highlights of things that you highlight in this book. What are some of the most common challenges or mistakes that you referenced earlier before the break that companies are making that are in this book?
Okay. Well, yeah, there's 3 I'd like to share. To start, I mentioned the first chapter of the new book is called Nail a Niche. And so these 7 parts. And the first one, each have a painful truth. And number 1 is you're not ready to grow till you nail a niche. And this comes from Jason and myself. Again, people come to us and they say, hey, we're ready to grow. We've hit product market fit, or we just need leads. And sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't grow, right? All the money they spend on marketing or sales is wasted because they weren't ready to grow in the first place. If you're struggling to grow, if you feel like you're not getting the results from marketing or prospecting, this will tell you why. And so one of the ideas from this chapter, and there's a bunch of them in there, is that there's this huge gap between growing organically from people who've heard of you or word of mouth, to being able to grow with outbound marketing or outbound prospecting. And it's not like the gap between moving from San Francisco to San Diego. It's more like the gap between moving from San Francisco to China. And people vastly underestimate how much harder it is to grow through outbound, marketing to people who don't know you, however that is, in marketing and prospecting, compared to some sort of prior relationships or networks or word of mouth. Way harder. We go explain why that is and what to do about it. But that's the first one. Like, you're not going to be able to grow until you get ready to put yourself in a place to be able to grow in the first place, in other words. There's another one I think is part 5. It's really important for people. It's really about the journey. But the painful truth for part 5 is it's going to take years longer than you want. And that's important. So you have to be able to do the time.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
Especially so we touch on things like why people feel so impatient. Right? There's this reality distortion field we live in. We're surrounded by success. Right, social media, because everyone posts all their successes on social media, and maybe 95%. Got a new job, raised money, sold a company, lost 20 pounds, got married, blah, blah, blah. So we're constantly surrounded by other people succeeding. At least that's our perception. While you, struggle, 95% of our day is dealing with the problems we're facing. And because that's what entrepreneurs do, whether you're like an individual entrepreneur with your career or a CEO. And so this feeling of, everyone's succeeding, I'm struggling, like, why is it so hard for me? Well, it's not. You're exactly where you need to be. Mm-hmm. You're not doing anything wrong. You just got to be able to do the time, and it takes 7 to 10 years to accomplish that really big goal you've had. So I think it's a really important point, because the thing is, if you give up too soon, or if you don't, keep taking the steps, that's the problem people face. Or basically unfair self-criticism. Like when you're struggling and you need to struggle. You can't create something great without the struggle. It's okay. Everyone goes through that.
Yeah, and I think those sometimes are the easy to hear, easy to say kind of lessons that are really hard to do in practice. And I want to talk in a second about one of the other points that's made in the book around employee ownership. But just want to highlight on your website, on the fromimpossible.com, not only can you learn more about Aaron, learn more about Jason, learn more about the book, but there's some great packages up here. If you're just going to buy one copy of the book, it's pretty impressive. You're getting a PDF of predictable revenue. You're getting a cold calling 2.0 guide. You're getting a ton of great freebies just by buying one book. But I know a lot of sales teams and a lot of, even just management teams are buying a book for everybody. And so there's some great packages up here where if you buy 5 books, you add 10 books. There's even more freebies available. You want to talk a little bit about some of those bundled deals you've got?
Go up to 10,000 books. But we've heard people say, on Twitter, I'm buying it for my whole team, or everyone, this should be a high school text. I don't think anyone's seen a book like this. I really don't. It's just different. It's totally different than predictable revenue. It does update and refresh what's in predictable revenue. Right? So if you had to choose from Impossible first, obviously if you pre-order it, you get predictable revenue PDF included. But, it's such an important book. I mean, there's things in here are just people need to hear. Again, like this, you're not ready to grow until you do these things. It takes a lot longer than you think. The last chapter is called Define Your Destiny. It's really written, it's for the owner of a business or a leader. It's all the things you want your employees to hear. You either don't want to tell them or that you're sick of repeating. So things like, what I hear, maybe what I've seen is that a lot of younger people, especially 20-somethings, get bored fast. There's not enough advancement. I don't have enough responsibility, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, there's a chapter, a piece of this last section, which is called Your Company's Not Your Mom and Your Daddy. It's like these kinds of messages that, your company's, their job is not to keep you entertained all the time. Company's job is not to keep you happy all the time. Right? Their job is 50% is to create an environment that's helpful or constructive, but the employees need to take responsibility too, where they have to, if they get bored fast, they need to figure out how to keep themselves entertained and how to keep themselves learning, or else every time they quit a job, they're just going to spend, their entire career job hopping. Because no matter where they go, that's where they're going to be. And so the company doesn't have to take full responsibility. The employee needs to take more for how they're going to advance their career, how they're going to keep themselves interested. I've had a lot of millennials say, "You nailed my company, for me, now I know how to advance my career. You nailed it for me." Right? Yeah. I was being too entitled. Like, now I have a better sense for how to contribute to the company rather than basically complain or sort of just do the minimum. Like, why should I go above and beyond my job description? Now I get it.
Yeah, and I would agree that it's really up to, individuals to sort of, to your point, define their own destiny. But you also talk in the book about, the role and onus on companies and executives to create a culture that drives people wanting to take an initiative. Real quick, talk a little bit about that idea of embracing employee ownership, and if you can give maybe just quickly, one or two sort of best practices or one or two things that companies can do to embrace and to do that.
Yeah. Now, I will say this book is not a culture book. This book is not a management book. It's not even a sales book. It's a growth book. And so what creates faster growth are things like nailing a niche. And there's parts on lead generation. There's parts on making your sales team scalable, increasing deal sizes, and so on. But like you said, if you're a leader, it doesn't matter. You can have the best idea in the world, but if your employees aren't bought in, you're not going to get this. You can't do it alone. Right? And they're not going to really put their all into it or put anything into it unless they're buying in some way. And what's missing, I think, from a lot of cultures, and I'm not saying this is easy, but what's missing is employee ownership, employee emotional ownership, where they feel like, yes, I want to do my best. I'm not just doing the minimum because that's like what my job says. I actually want to put my best in, and I want to do more. I want to take the initiative. What would it be like if your employees didn't have to wait around to be told what to do all the time? Because frankly, most of them do, right? What owner says, my employees, they're contributing too much. I can't keep up. No, owners or leaders, right? Any managers, it's like, why don't my employees sort of think more like me? Why don't they just see the problem and solve it without having their hands having to be held all the time? So one of the ideas here in that chapter, or that part is, and by the way, painful truth for part 6, the painful truth is your employees are renting, not owning their jobs. And it's called Embrace Employee Ownership. And it's about how an employee or a person doesn't have full emotional ownership unless they're the single public owner of that, role. And plus they have the decision-making authority over whatever they're doing. Mm-hmm. And there's more details on how to do it and what that means. But again, it's things like even when it's not, even when you so desperately want to help them with a decision, you have to let them make their decisions, even when they're wrong. Because anytime you make a decision for them, you're stealing that opportunity to practice that decision-making skill, which can be very hard for people, especially if they've really been growing up where all their decisions were made by their parents.
Awesome. Hey, Aaron, really appreciate your time. I know you're crazy busy and in very high demand, but we appreciate you jumping on the show today. Really excited about the new book. For those of you who want to check it out, go to FromImpossible.com. The name of the book is From Impossible to Inevitable. You can pre-order a copy of the book. You can get a free excerpt from the book at the website, so definitely check that out. If you want to check out this episode again, if you want to check out past episodes of Sales Pipeline Radio, just go to SalesPipelineRadio.com. You'll get every past episode up there anytime. Will join us again next Thursday, same time, same place. New guests, more Sales Pipeline. Thanks again very much to Aaron Ross, our guest today. Thanks everyone for joining. This has been Sales Pipeline Radio.
You haven't just been riding the waves and looking at the internet. You've been surfing the Sales Pipeline with Matt Hines from Hines Marketing.